These NFL teams could be most likely to draft quarterbacks in 2020. We had 4 QBs drafted in the first 42 selections this past April, though, which still shows you how valued a commodity the position is viewed as. The 2017, but even with 9 teams making heavy investments at QB over the past 2 seasons, there remains a host of franchise that might be interested in taking one next year. If Oregon's just consider, too, that Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray in no way were considered strong possibilities to be top pick candidates at this time 2 years and 1 year ago, respectively. There are always these NFL teams are ranked somewhat by the perceived strength of their 2020 QB draft needs, even with a million factors to figure out between now and then. We certainly could, but for now, here's how we handicap it. Do they have Andy Dalton, Ryan Finley, Jeff Driscoll, Jacob Dolgala? The Bengals passed on Dwayne Haskins last year to draft an offensive lineman in round 1 for the second straight year. We believe that said, the Bengals ended up drafting Finley near the top of round 4, but we believe he profiles more as a career backup and spot starter. Maybe Finley gets, I don't know if they're the favorites to land, say, Alabama's Tua Tagovailoa. But it might be fun. 2020 QB draft likelihood moderately high. Who they have? Ryan Fitzpatrick, Josh Rosen, Jake Rudock. The feeling in Miami is that the team must find out whether Rosen can be that guy. Whether Rosen has time to win it. In fact, but the Dolphins are not tethered to him completely. They sent a low 2020 QB draft likelihood relatively high, but Rosen can change that. Who they have? Jameis Winston, Blaine Gabbert, Ryan Griffin, Nick Fitzgerald. The addition of Bruce Arians gives Winston a chance to resurrect his career, which has gotten off course via inconsistencies on the field and off-field worries. It's pretty much as cut and dry as that. None of the other and even if Winston plays well enough, let's say, to earn a franchise tag in 2020, it would behoove the Bucs to dip into the QB draft pool. You can be sure that 2020 QB draft likelihood moderately high. Who they have? Marcus Mariota, Ryan Tannehill, Logan Woodside. There's a growing sense that Mariota might never put it all together in what is a flashpoint season in Tennessee. The acquisition of Mariota hasn't improved enough as a passer, but injuries are a part of his lack of development. He has yet to play. Neither QB has played much higher than as a replacement level starter in the league for sustained periods, although this season certainly could change that. But even if one of 2020 QB draft likelihood relatively high. Who they have? Matthew Stafford, Tom Savage, David Follis. The Lions were one of the busier teams this past winter in terms of doing homework on the 2019 draft quarterbacks, and yet they did not end up selecting one or signing an undrafted free agent. In what was considered, but that doesn't mean the Lions won't be taking the same approach next year with the 2020 QB lot, and next spring just might be the time to strike. There's no young QB. Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia might be in a similar situation to what Bill Belichick faced early in his New England tenure, where the Patriots' high-priced QB Drew Bledsoe clearly was good enough to start for someone, but that things had run their course once Tom Brady thrived. That said, their 2020 QB draft likelihood moderately high. Who they have? Aaron Rodgers, DeShone Kizer, Tim Boyle, Manny Wilkins. Depending on what you think about Kizer or Boyle or Wilkins, we suppose it would not be stunning to see the Packers dip their toes into the QB waters next year. For the record, the Packers signed Rodgers to an extension that realistically makes him an elite boat anchor until the 2022 offseason at the soonest. Had be entering his. Still, there's a case for the Packers grooming a LaFleur picked understudy next year, and the Packers were sniffing around Missouri's Drew Lock. Ultimately, and if a similar situation presents itself in 2020, the Packers might not let the next QB slide by. 2020 QB draft likelihood medium. Who they have: Kirk Cousins, Kyle Slaughter, Sean Mannion, Jake Browning. Year 1 of the Cousins deal didn't net the desired results the Vikings thought they were paying for, and he's now facing the prospect of delivering now or facing fans' wrath to an even greater level before long. Cousins enters this, but there's also some tension around the situation for that ever fully happening, so the time to find a potential successor could be nigh next April. Slaughter might carry. The team has used first-round picks on QBs Christian Ponder and Teddy Bridgewater in relatively recent history, but last used a lower pick on a passer on John David Booty all the way back in 2008. We could see them ending 2020 QB draft likelihood medium. Who they have: Tom Brady, Brian Hoyer, Danny Etling, Jarrett Stidham. This comes down to a few factors. How well does Brady play in his age 42 season? Can Stidham or Etling, we suppose, show enough in camp and preseason to convince them he's their guy? How much longer are Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels going to be around? Brady is a free agent after this year. That's a little wild, right? There have been some The Patriots are a tough team to pin down, strategy-wise. There are no absolute. If Stidham flashes some promise, we could see the Patriots punting on a QB high in next year's draft. But who really knows? 2020 QB draft likelihood medium to low. Who they have: Phillip Rivers, Tyrod Taylor, Cardale Jones, Easton Stick. The immediate need is really low. Rivers is a top but that doesn't mean that the Chargers couldn't use another developmental QB at some point. They've been a terrific. Yes, they certainly could spend the next year or two drafting for immediate need, knowing that Rivers' window isn't going to be open forever. Look at how the Saints. That said, it's not as if the Chargers haven't done plenty of work on QBs the past few drafts just in case, and they could go that route again. We're not thinking 2020 QB draft likelihood low to medium. Who they have: Drew Brees, Taysom Hill, Teddy Bridgewater. Brees turns 41 next January, and though he appears to have that's just not a realistic long-term plan. And it's not like this. Bridgewater is a tricky call here. Yes, this Hill might be an X factor, and he's listed as a QB even IFA. But for now, and then there's the Sean Payton factor. What if the coach leaves after this season for, say, the Dallas Cowboys? That has been heavily. The Saints are short 2 2020 draft picks, including a second-rounder that's headed to Miami, and they aren't scheduled to receive a compensatory pick. That's 2 years in 2020 QB draft likelihood low to medium. Atlanta Falcons: Matt Ryan, Matt Schwab, Kurt Benkert. They've invested less in draft QBs than any team in football the past decade. That will have to change. Oakland Raiders: Derek Carr, Mike Glennon, Nathan Peterman. They can get out from under next year quite easily, and they have 2 first-rounders in 2020, theirs and the Bears. If Carr and Antonio. Jacksonville Jaguars: Nick Foles, Tanner Lee, Gardner Minshew too, Alex McGuff. Ever since the Bortles pick, they've taken late-round flyers, poked around the waiver wire and went big on Foles. Eventually. More from Yahoo Sports.
Raindrop, drop top, top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.